how do we function as a church in a situation where we can't all meet together so easily? That's the question that's before us at the moment, isn't it? As coronavirus goes around, at the moment, we're still allowed to meet on Sundays and at other times. We're still meeting as a church. But even now, there are members of our church family who are not able to join us, either because somebody in their family has a cold, or they've got a cold or something like that, they're staying away for that reason, or because they're vulnerable to infection, they're staying away for that reason. How do we meet? How do we function as a church where already the family is a bit more scattered than it would normally be? Well, I'm going to do some drawing for you. Drawing is not my thing, so bear with me. But here's an idea for us. So I'm very thankful that already we've got things that help us to keep in touch with each other quite easily. So up here we've got a big thing. I'm going to call this the Christchurch WhatsApp group. If you know the WhatsApp messenger thing, it's a great way of keeping in touch using mobile phones, using technology. And we've got one at Christchurch. It works really well. I really like it. It's a way of passing on things like Bible teaching, things like encouraging thoughts, things like prayer requests, stuff like that together. And in that group, people offer to help each other. But here's the thing, this is a bit too big a group to actually work as a way of supporting each other practically. In order to kind of encourage each other, to know what's going on in each other's lives, to be able to help and ask for help when needed, we need to be in smaller groups. So that's what's going on down here. These are smaller groups. Here's 5 of them. Let's say these are groups of about 10 people. Now, in a group of about 10 people, you can keep in touch with each other. You can ask each other what's going on. If there's a problem, if someone's isolated, if they're in need of help, practical help maybe like shopping, encouragement help, that sort of thing, well, we can ask each other, we can provide that help from one to another. So that can happen in a smaller group. What's important is that these groups are connected in with the big one, the bigger Christchurch group, so that helpful things can be passed on. Because in a church, in a scattered church setting, we still need the same things. We still need God's word. We still need prayer. We still need encouragement from one to another, fellowship in the Lord. And so what we can do as a church is we can pass on that stuff, Bible teaching, prayer, helpful songs, things like that. So I'm going to put up here some other things. I'm going to put up here Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp again. Those are all really useful ways that the Christchurch leadership, people like me, can record things like sermons or songs or prayers and pass them on to the church family. So if we pass that on to the Christchurch WhatsApp group, then as long as each of these groups has somebody who's connected to the bigger group, well, then they can pass on the things that come, circulate them around, and hopefully make that helpful for those members of the group, so everyone gets the same access to the same teaching and prayer and information about what's going on. So what's needed in each of these groups is a well, let's call them a hub person, a person at the hub of the wheel, somebody who makes the conversations happen, somebody who passes on the information, who lets people know in that group what's going on, so that practically those groups can support each other. Another thing which we might want to say is this, that, well, there might be times where there's extra help that's needed. And then it's not just passing on to the groups, but we can also pass back from the groups things, needs, and then we might need an extra layer here. I'm going to call this layer practical help. Practical help. Now, it might be that there are some amongst us who are really good at running errands, at providing stuff, providing help in terms of food or shopping or whatever it is, or going around to people's houses and people like me perhaps who might want to go around and read the Bible and pray with people and encourage them, maybe share the Lord's Supper with them, things like that. We can provide that help too. I guess what's important is in an infection situation, we don't want to be just one or two people going to see a lot of people, because when that happens, it's much easier to pass on the infection. So the smaller group model is more effective, more helpful in that setting. So we need people at a small group level to be in touch with each other. We need people to be hub people within these groups to make the conversations happen. We need people who are able to provide particular practical help within the church family, run errands and things like that, to keep that support going. One other question, I've talked about WhatsApp. The obvious question is, well, what about all the people who don't have WhatsApp? What about the people who don't have mobile phones or email or such like? Well, let's say this group here, let's say people in this group here, they don't have WhatsApp. But they do have, well, that's meant to be a phone. They do have old-fashioned phones. Let's give it a wire to make it really clear. So okay, they still have phones. So the people in this group, well, it might be a little bit more difficult to pass on recorded sermons and songs. That might not be so easy. Maybe we need to do other things like pass on sermon transcripts or something like that that might be helpful to them. But we can still call and we can still pray over the phone, can't we? Even if isolated, even if not able to meet face to face, we can still pray over the phone. And so that's really important that goes on. So these things can happen in different ways through, WhatsApp or email or phoning or whatever. There are different range of ways that we can keep in touch with each other, even if we are scattered, even if we're unable to meet. And one other thing that's important to say about that is, well, this. In 1 Timothy chapter 5, Paul talks about a widow's list. That's WL there. Widow's list. A widow's list, which was a list of widows in the church in Ephesus who were without family, who were not supported by their own families. They were vulnerable, they were alone, and the church took particular care of those people. And so the question for us is, well, who are our metaphorical widows? Who are our members at Christ Church who are more isolated from family or neighbours who could support? Who are those who are particularly vulnerable and alone? We as a church need to take extra good care of those people. And so it might be that each of these groups takes somebody or a couple of people under their wing who are a bit more isolated, a bit more in need of just a bit of careful looking after. So that's my picture. I hope you find it helpful. It's there to show what being a church family that's scattered might look like. It's going to look like keeping in touch with each other in small settings. It's going to look like hub people passing on information. It's going to look like people working on the technology to get the Bible teaching and the prayer passed around. It's going to look like taking particular care of those members of our church family who are isolated and alone. And I pray that God will use it to grow us, because these things, looking after each other in practical ways with word and prayer, that's what Jesus says will build his church. Thank you for watching.